Before I get started, my name is Scott Toliniski. I'm the co-host of the Syntax podcast and the creator of Level Up Tutorials. You can find me on Twitter and the socials at stolinsky or at syntax.fm. It's a, oh no. What's going on here? Okay, there we go. All right. There we go. Okay, so we do a podcast 3 times a week talking about web development. And the thing that we do really well on our podcast is we try to make it really fun. And it's not about dry code. It's not about just the tech side of things. It's all about the entire aspect of making learning fun. And that's really what me and my co-host Wes Boss try to do 3 times a week. So check it out at syntax.fm, or it's in all the podcast players and stuff. So what exactly are we talking about in CSS today? Well, one of the cool things about my job, being able to teach CSS, teach JavaScript, is that I get to come across a ton of cool new stuff. That was always been my favorite thing. One of my first jobs in the industry was at Ford building experimental interfaces, and nobody had to use this stuff, so we got to use all the latest and greatest whatever we wanted to. And so I've always been a big fan of cutting edge CSS, cutting edge JavaScript, any of that stuff. So we're going to be talking about all the latest and greatest because that's really what I like the most. And one of the cool things about that is that a lot of this stuff in this talk is newer than ChatGPT, so you can't even get this stuff on ChatGPT, which will save you from your job being taken by the robots, right? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be rapid fire talking about a ton of new features in CSS, and we're going to be giving them a ship score. And that ship score is either going to be check it, which means check it out. It's maybe not supported at all. It's just here's some cool stuff that you should be aware of. There's also try it, which is supported in 1 or 2 or just 1 browser. And then the last one is ship it, which should be self-explanatory. It means you can ship it. There'll be some caveats to that ship it in a second. But if you're out there, I have a compendium of all the links from this talk because I want to do kind of rapid fire. I don't have a ton of time, so I don't want to go too deep into any of these topics. So I'll have this available at the end of the talk as well. This is a list of all of links for everything that I'm going to be talking about today, just so that I don't have to show you 1,000 demos, okay? So I'll get moving on this, and then this will be the last slide of the talk as well, so you can get this if you didn't get it. Or it's my pinned tweet right now on Twitter, So this caveats that I was talking about, progressive enhancement is very important. So a lot of these techniques, I'm going to be kind of ignoring the progressive enhancement bit of it today. But a lot of these things you can progressively enhance so that you can use them today. So if I say you can ship it, it means that it's supported in the latest versions of the big 3 browsers, or there is a post-CSS plugin. Post-CSS is a processor for your CSS, and there's something called preset env inside of post-CSS that allows you to ship new features that aren't yet totally supported in the browser. And if you just look at the preset env docs for post-CSS, you can find a massive amount of cool new features. So the first thing we're going to be diving into is media queries. Now, media queries are great. We've always had okay, yeah, the comment doesn't matter. But we've always had this min-width syntax, right? Min-width, max-width, whatever. And I don't know about you, but I hate that syntax because I can't remember it. Every single time I write max-width first, and then I write min-width, and then I move the browser around, and it eventually works, right? But now we have this great new syntax, which is the range syntax that allows us to use greater than or equal to, greater than or equal, well, wrong one, there we go. Greater than, less than, greater than, equal to, yeah. So we can even do this in this really great way where we can say, hey, your width is greater than or equal to 400 pixels and then less than 1,000 pixels. And that's the range for the media query, which to me, this is way easier to read overall as somebody who I just never really loved the previous syntax. So can you ship this today? You can ship it. It's supported in just about every browser, and it's been supported in Firefox since version 63. And you might get, so these numbers might not mean anything to you right now if you're not really diving into the browser variation or versions, whatever. But you'll start to recognize the high-low numbers when different browsers have got it. So Firefox has had this forever. I'm going to do a fun GIF for all of these, by the way. This guy's Pocket from South Korea. He's really good. OK. Next up is custom media queries, which this is something that a lot of people might not know about, but it's at custom media, and then you give your media query a name, and then you define your media query. Then whenever you want to use it, you say media at above me. It's like SAS or Stylus or any of these. You got to define your custom media queries and then use them in a really more readable way. Now, what's so cool about this is that even though the support for this, as you'll see, is bad, in fact, non-existent, you can ship it with post-CSS today because it's just a simple string replacement. And so we've been shipping that syntax in CSS on the Level Up Tutorials website for about 1.5 years now. And it's not in the browser yet, but you can ship it with post-CSS today. And it honestly, it makes writing media queries a lot more readable in your code. Now, next up is container queries. Container queries are a feature many of you may have heard of, some of you may have not. And a container query, normally with a media query, you're measuring by the browser width. With a container query, you're saying, no, wait, we actually want to take that out of the browser, and we want to look at this in a component size. So we're measuring a specific component's container size, and then being able to use that as the bounds in which a media query works. And you can even give them a name, as you can see in this syntax, container card /inline size. Now, there's a little bit more that goes along here with this inline size, and the syntax, we're not going to dive too deep into it, but you can see that by using @container card width equals 300, we're measuring the container rather than the viewport, which, since we're building everything in components already anyways today, this just makes perfect sense. If you're building a card, it shouldn't be measured by the browser width. It should be measured by itself, right? There's also these really neat container query units, which I don't know about you, but I just found out there's 50 length units in CSS now. So that's wild. But these are some of the new ones. CQW, which is 1% of the container query's width, which is if you've used viewport units, right? VW, VH. This is the same thing, but for the container. And with CSS, you toss 100% on something. Height 100%, width 100%. It's a guessing game. Is this going to work today? I have no idea, right? So with this, you can always say, oh, the container, fill the container's width of a given percentage, which, like, these are going to be really cool. And can you ship these? Can you ship any of this stuff? Yes, you can ship it. This was just added to Firefox in 1.10 on Valentine's Day, which was awesome. But it was in Safari and Chrome before that. This guy's named Lilou. He's a world champion from France. All right. They're not all going to be breakdancing, by the way. All right. Next one is container style queries. This allows you to have a media query, or in this case, a container query, essentially, a query based on a given CSS property. Now, what's so cool about this example is that we're using a CSS custom property, but eventually this will come for actual CSS properties. Although my understanding is that it's shipping first as custom properties specifically, and then it will move into other CSS properties. Now, this is really neat because we're saying, hey, we have a custom property, and its theme value is wave race. Well, the container now says, hey, if this individual card or whatever has a custom property of wave race, then we can apply all sorts of CSS. And you might look at this at first. So like, I'll give you my understanding of this. Is I looked at this at first and I said, that's so cool, I can't wait to do that. And then I thought about it for a second. I was like, wait, I could do that with a class. I could just add a class of wave race on this and then do that CSS. But with classes, you then have to worry about the specificity of it all. You have to worry about the cascade a little bit more. This really keeps things cleaner in a way that you're not going to have to worry about the order in which things are coming into your CSS. So this is really neat. And unfortunately, this is it's behind a flag in Chrome Canary. And this is one of those ones I think you're going to see a lot more of. But right now, it's currently in the check it phase. You can't see because of the color here, but there's a big red X is on all of the browsers. He's checking it out. Okay. Next up is color. There's a lot of cool stuff in color. It's going to be hard to show you with this display color, but there's a lot of really neat stuff. And one of these things is that when we first started, or when I first started in CSS, you had very limited options for color. You had a handful of colors, and these were like web-safe colors that you could use. Then we got hexadecimal colors that were way opened up beyond a handful of colors. And then that opened up into RGB, RGBA, HSL, HSLA. But now we're getting not only more color formats like LCH, but we're getting new color spaces. So we have display P3 as the first of these color spaces that is really going to be hitting and making a big difference in our CSS. And this syntax, it might be a little bit scary because you're like, oh, okay, LCH, but it's LCH stands for lightness, chroma, and hue. Lightness is pretty self-explanatory. Chroma, this is like one time I have to use my notes here. Chroma is the colorfulness relative to the brightness of a similarly illuminated white. But in practice, it ends up feeling a lot like saturation. This one I really like because it's actually really easy to author. And once you get the handle of these numbers and what they all mean, it's actually really nice to write. Now, what's so cool about this is that it gives us access to colors that we never had before. Yeah, I can't really show this with how this is going, but let's see if I can do it this way. I don't want to mess anything up. Okay, cool. So what's so cool about these is what you see here is that there's this double triangle on top of here. And if we pick something more in the green space, it becomes a little bit more obvious. You see this double triangle. This lower triangle right here is the highest green we have access to in CSS. But with this new display P3 and some of these new color spaces, we can go up here, okay? And it's a bummer that it says this is unavailable on this monitor because this works on your normal monitor. And that actually makes this feature really interesting because it's not just limited by the browser, it's also limited by the display. But the cool thing is with this color picker, and this is in the notes, you can see exactly what the fallback will end up being. So you can plan your CSS variables or your colors accordingly to make sure that the colors all work. Now, when you try this on your MacBook Pro or whatever laptop you're using, you're going to see some like really, really vivid colors. And it honestly makes a huge difference in a way that you might not expect it to. So these things are really cool. And let me see. There we go. OK, good. Didn't mess anything up there. Let's see. OK LCH. Can you ship OK LCH and display P3? Well, OK LCH as a color format you can ship today. It's available in all major browsers. There's an asterisk next to Firefox here because, like I mentioned with this display, Firefox doesn't support display P3. So that extra little bit, you won't get that extra little bit. The colors will be just slightly more washed out on Firefox or on displays that don't support it. But because OKLCH actually works, you can author an OKLCH, and it's going to work just fine. There's also OKLab, which is cool, but I use OKLCH only because I like writing it by hand more. Now, here's a cool one, color mix. It allows you to mix two colors together. First, you say, in OKLCH or whatever, in RGBA, whatever you want, give it one color, give it the amount you want to mix, and then the color you want to mix it to. So in this case, we're creating a tint of teal, right? And this is a really cool syntax. I've been wanting to do this stuff forever, to make color systems automatically. And it might surprise you that the ship score for this is supported in all major browsers, which is cool. And there's a post-CSS plugin for it if you want to do a fallback. This guy's named Mr. Wave from the New York City Breakers. This is Beat Street. There we go. I like Mr. Wave. Yeah, there he goes. OK. Next up is color contrast. Now, this is probably I don't know how, all of these are really exciting for me, but color contrast is super exciting because what color contrast does is it takes a color and then compares it to a list of other colors and then returns the one that has the highest color contrast value. And you can even specify the degree of contrast that you need. So let's say the background of our website is set to be black here, and then that gets passed into this first variable. So if we have a black background, and you look at tan, blue, and black here, it's going to return tan because tan has the highest contrast ratio. But if the opposite happens, if all of a sudden that CSS background variable changes to white, it's automatically going to return the 0, 0, 0, giving you the highest contrast ratio, which is so great because like that's one of the biggest pains right now in CSS is dealing with different themes. You have to end up writing a ton of CSS to support this kind of stuff, when here it ends up going to be a one-liner. Now, unfortunately, color contrast, you cannot ship today, which is a bummer. But it should be on your radar. This is one of the things that I think will probably eventually get a good polyfill or something in post-CSS that you can ship before it ends up becoming available. And I've even seen some really creative examples. In fact, in the next slide here, in this link, there's some really creative examples where somebody's using a sign function in CSS to automatically do this anyways. So there's going to be ways to do it, but relative color is another one that's really fascinating because what you get to do is essentially explode out a color value. So if we have an HSL function, this HSL function we say from a color, if we say from color, what that does is then explodes that color out into its 3 variables, H, S, and L. And then we can provide calculations to any of these or just replace the values entirely, and it's going to smush it back into a real color based on which color function you want to use, RGB, RGBA, whatever. So relative color is going to allow making color systems extremely easy. In fact, in this link, I'll try to do this. There we go. No. OK, whatever. I was connected a second ago. Either way, go to that link in the compendium, whatever. It shows you that somebody makes a whole color system with contrast off of one color value. And you can change the sliders, and choose everything. And it just takes one color value and explodes it out into a whole color system. It's really super good. So relative colors. Can you ship this today? You can ship it with post-CSS as of last week. In fact, this stuff in this talk is also wild to me because I had to keep updating these slides as the week got closer and keep checking the things because things were shipping as I was making this talk. So this is now available with a post-CSS plugin in CSS, and it's easy. As long as you're using post-CSS preset env, you can use these features. So he's kind of ready, but he's not fully ready yet. OK. Next up is the Cascade. There's a lot of cool stuff coming in the Cascade, and one that's been getting a lot of attention is Has. Has, for good reason, has been getting a ton of attention. It's the parent selector. I remember in 2011, this kind of thing, when you were first learning CSS, you'd be like, how do I style this based on the child? You can't. That's not how CSS works. But now it's how CSS works. You can say, if the card has a child that has a class, then style the card this way. And this allows for some really great ways of being able to take a card and being able to say, all right, if this includes this thing, then we get to make all of these other changes to the card itself. So Has is really cool. I could not be more excited for this. In fact, this one it pains me the most that this is in Try It because this is JB Fletcher. She's looking at this, and she's wondering why Firefox doesn't have it yet. But it's behind a flag in Firefox right now, which means it's coming really soon. And I'm extremely excited about that. Next up is Cascade layers. Cascade layers allow you to define your own layers in CSS. So you could say, all right, I have my base layer, I have my reset layer, I have my theme, whatever. And you can give them an order. So where I'm defining them here based on their order, you say reset is first and then base, which means that everything in base will override reset. And therefore, the order in which those are described means that you no longer have to worry about, if you're using layers, you no longer have to worry about the order in which your CSS is authored, as long as you're putting them into a layer, because then you can control which layer sits on top of which layer. And it's going to take our CSS out of essentially, this sits on top of this because I authored it this way, right? Which has always been one of those things in CSS, is like, where is my thing overriding my other thing? So browser support for Cascade layers. This one's going to be shocking. 99 in Chrome, 97 in Firefox. It's been in CSS. I don't know who's using it. I haven't used this in production, but this has been in CSS, and we're going to be shipping this too. So this is this is a great new feature and one that I'm going to be taking advantage of. It's not as exciting, but it's definitely one of the ones that will change how you author CSS, and you can do it today. This one might scare some people. This is @property. It's kind of like types for CSS variables. You love TypeScript, now we got it in CSS. And that, in a sentence, could sound really scary, right? Because like we all know TypeScript. We all know the challenges of working in TypeScript. But what we're able to do here is say, hey, I have a CSS variable, it's color primary, and it's the type of color. Now, this allows us to do some stuff we couldn't do before, because the way this worked before is they were all strings. And because it's all strings, CSS is just like, okay, whatever, which is one of the big reason why you can't do CSS transitions on gradients in CSS, right? We all know you want to hover and change the point on a gradient in CSS. You can't do that. But if you make your color a defined color in CSS as the type here, you can now do those types of transitions and transforms on CSS, which it's a small thing, but it's going to really like remove some of those limitations. So the type values for those are going to be length, number, percentage, length percentage, color, image, URL, integer, angle, time, resolution, transform list, transform function, custom indent. So all that stuff. We're going to get it in CSS. We got types. It's not going to do type checking or anything like that. But what it's going to do is it's going to allow us to work with variables CSS in a way that we've never been able to before. @property. Check it out. It's supported in Chrome since version 85. I don't even know when that shipped. 16.4. So this is in the try it phase. You can try this thing out today in Chrome. We're waiting on Firefox. It might break the door if you try it. All right, animation. I love animation. I have a motion graphics background. So for me, these animation features are probably the most exciting features in CSS. And the first up is the View Transitions API. Now, View Transitions allow you to do native style app transitions. You click a button, things slide over. You click a card, the title zooms up to where it is in the displayed view. There's a lot of really cool demos in my links for this. So a lot of the coolest demos in these, by the way, are in the animation section. So you'll want to check this out. But what this essentially allows you to do is eventually, without JavaScript or with minimal JavaScript, allow you to have real native app style transitions using CSS. I'm not going to have to import a massive animations library inside of my already massive framework to duplicate DOM elements and have them zoom around and still get 30 to 20 FPS out of it. The browser is going to be able to handle all of that, and it does it through screenshots in a really interesting way. And not only that, but there's actually going to be baked into the browser animations, predefined animations. So if you're doing a fade from one page to another, you don't even have to write the animation itself. You just pass in, it's like hyphen, and it's I don't have the string memorized, but you pass it in to your animation, your page transition, and it just fades between pages. Now this one is really interesting. This is one thing that it's under try right now. And what's really cool about this one, though, is we'll be shipping this API in the new syntax website, because the fallback for it is just that the page handles a normal page transition, or normal without any sort of animation. So the progressive enhancement in the fallback for it is basically like it doesn't even exist, meaning that if you want to ship this today, your Chrome users will get a fancy page transition and animation, and everybody else will just get a normal experience, which is great. This is Vin Diesel, by the way. He was like 16 or something. I have this on VHS. It's a rare tape on how to breakdance from the 80s. I like how he's like really he's really into it. Okay. All right, scroll animations. Now, scroll animations, again, this is another one that's going to prevent us from shipping a ton of JavaScript for something like this. What we get is this animation timeline and the scroll function. We can say, hey, we want this animation to take place based on the scrolling of either the root, which is the page scrolling, the nearest scrolling div, so if it's inside of a scrolling div, or itself. So you could get access to actually doing CSS transitions and animations with the browser scroll with zero JavaScript. I've been seeing some wild demos for this, and this is one of the ones you're going to want to see in the links that I have because Brahma has a page full of a whole bunch of really exciting, like you enter and things fade in, the type of web experiences that you see that are very JavaScript heavy. We can get rid of JavaScript to do that and let the browser handle it. The browser's really good at like optimizing FPS and doing all that stuff. So scroll animations, can you ship it? No, you can't ship this one today. This is one that you want to at least be aware of. You're going to want to check out some of the JavaScript-based demos that they have because it'll show you exactly like what you can do with this. But if you're planning on features that you would like to use, this is one of those features that to me is extremely fascinating, and I'm going to be keeping a close eye on this, and hopefully we'll get to try it. It's actually behind a flag already in, I believe, Chrome or Chrome Canary. But it's behind a flag, so if you want to mess with it, you can at least mess with it, but it's probably just better to wait until it drops. All right, I think we have two more. Animation composition. Animation composition is the ability to add multiple animations. Typically, you have something that's animating, and let's say you want to add another animation when you hover over it. That interrupts the animation, or you have to take in consideration of that current animation. In things like After Effects, you can animate something, then you can compose it and add animations to it. And we're going to be able to do that in CSS with this simple animation composition. Animation composition add will mean that if you have something that's getting bigger and smaller, and we want to say, hey, go left and right too, when we say, hey, go left and right, this animation won't be interrupted. It's just going to keep doing that, right? This is something you can't do right now in CSS. And it feels like it's small, but it's going to make animations feel way better in CSS overall. So animation composition, believe it or not, is supported in Safari and Chrome. Firefox, odd man out again here. But yeah, so this one's really cool. You can try it today. It's nice and fun. Next one is linear. Now linear, when you think about linear easing curves, this is with animation and easing curves. When you think about linear, you think of the one you're not supposed to use. It's just like flat, right? But this allows you to microscopically add animation linear points. So check out how long this is. I'm going to get my mouse scrolly here. Check out how long this is. You can't do this with Bezier curves. This thing just keeps going. Look at this. Whoa. And you're not going to author these by hand. Somebody smarter than you is going to author these. Somebody smarter than me is going to make a whole repo full of these things, and you're just going to copy and paste them. But what this allows you to do is create micro points inside of an easing curve. So animations will then be able to really micro-define essentially what an animation is doing at any given percentage, meaning that instead of just the generic kind of bounce or quadratic ease in, ease in out, whatever types of deals we have right now, we're going to be able to get true, really control over our easing curves inside of CSS. And again, there's some really great demos in these as well. So linear. Linear is supported today inside of Chrome and Firefox. Unfortunately, Safari is the first one that does not have support for this in this one. Robocop's about to try one of these. He likes it. There he goes. But yeah, so this is one of those APIs that, like, on the surface, it seems kind of boring, right? A linear function. But when we're talking about giving life to our web applications, this is one of the things that's going to give our applications more life. And that's really what animation can do for us. So that's it. There's like 1,000 more CSS stuff that's coming in. I wish I could have added more. I was like debating on it, how many more slides to add to this thing. But these are some of my most favorite ones. I tried to prune this down. If you want to learn, go deep on any of these things. If there's something that you saw that you can ship today that you want to ship, you can go ahead and scan this. Again, it's my pinned tweet at @Toliniski on Twitter. But go ahead and check that out. It's a big old link of blog posts from very smart people who are oftentimes working on this stuff. So that's it. Thanks so much.